Have a question about the 2019 novel coronavirus, 2019 nCoV? Ask us here. On Thursday, January 30, 2020, the World Health Organization declared that the new coronavirus epidemic now constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. A majority of cases are affecting people in Hubei province, China, but additional cases have been reported in at least 24 other countries. This new coronavirus is currently called the 2019 novel coronavirus, or 2019 nCoV. The moderators of r/Ask Science have assembled a list of frequently asked questions, including: how does 2019 nCoV spread? What are the symptoms? What are known risk and prevention factors? How effective are masks at preventing the spread of 2019 nCoV? What treatment exists? What role might pets and other animals play in the outbreak? What can I do to help prevent the spread of 2019 nCoV if I am sick? What sort of misinformation is being spread about 2019 nCoV? Our experts will be on hand to answer your questions below. We also have an earlier megathread with additional information. Note: we cannot give medical advice. All requests for or offerings of personal medical advice will be removed, as they're against the r/Ask Science rules. For more information, please see this post. How does this compare to previous viral outbreaks like SARS, Zika and Ebola? I don't remember entire cities or regions being evacuated of foreigners, or cities walling themselves off with other outbreaks. Is this a bigger deal than previous outbreaks? It's most comparable to SARS, which was another coronavirus. Currently, it's less deadly than SARS but more contagious. It also seems to be pretty stable in humans, meaning not a lot of mutation has been observed, so hopefully it won't mutate into something more lethal. Zika doesn't spread person to person, so it's not really comparable. Edit. Zika can spread person to person through sex, but it's mainly through mosquitoes. Ebola is not very contagious but can be very deadly. What are the chances of contracting the virus in a major city outside China? The media is doing its thing and generating a lot of fear. I'd like to know whether most people here need to actually be worried about contracting the virus. Very unlikely in a developed country. Quarantine procedures are very effective and people who may have been affected are contacted or notified to watch their health. If you're in developing country, it's difficult to tell, but your chance of contracting the virus is much higher because the people who already have the virus have likely not be isolated, thus you may get it from them. Overall, your chance of contracting corona is quite low. Just take safety precautions such as staying away from people who seem sick. Sanitize your hands and eating surfaces. Is it true that this is very contagious? I am reading that the virus size is large and droplets in the air fall to the ground or surfaces quickly, so it's not as contagious as if the virus were smaller and would stay in the air longer. Are people correct in saying this is very contagious? What is correct? The virus has a larger shedding period in an infected individual, relative to your basic common cold viruses. That means that a person infected is able to infect other people over a longer period of time. There is currently belief that someone infected with the present coronavirus is shedding the virus even before he starts having symptoms. As you can imagine, that makes the virus a lot more contagious, because someone may not know they are at risk of infecting someone else. Don't know if I'm too late for this talk. My question is whether there is a possibility for this strain to become seasonal like the flu? What makes the flu, with all of its types, not simply die off with a quarantine like how it happens with SARS? The other reply seems to have misunderstood your question. I would say that, we do not know if this strain, if it becomes pandemic, will eventually die off. A few of the viruses that cause the common cold every year are also coronaviruses, so it is possible. The flu does not die off every year because it continues to spread at lower levels to the tropics and then the opposite hemisphere, undergoing assortment with other flu viruses and evolving all the time. Coronaviruses are known to recombine, exchange pieces of their DNA, with other viruses and evolve all the time. Just wanted to point people towards this excellent New York Times article from today which has some very accurate graphics for understanding this outbreak. There's a lot of conflicting information about asymptomatic carriers and the latency in presentation of symptoms. What do we know about these two subjects? Do the carriers present with viral shedding for the same duration as a symptomatic infection? What is the average latency in confirmed cases? Very good questions. Singapore may be able to help provide some answers soon. Singapore currently has 13 infections, all of them mainland Chinese tourists who are being kept in isolation in 2 Singapore hospitals. All of them mingled to a greater or lesser extent with the local population before being admitted. 139 close contacts have been identified and 134 of those have already been traced and are being monitored. It is still the incubation period, but so far no locals have been reported as being infected. The next 2 weeks will be very instructive as it will show how widely this group infected others in a country they were visiting. From that we will get better idea of the virus's potential. Fortunately, Singapore has the expertise and infrastructure to get a good handle on this and provide reliable data. Update. There are now 18 cases in Singapore. 17 are mainland Chinese tourists who traveled from Wuhan. The other is a Singaporean who traveled back from Wuhan on the recent evacuation flight. There are still no reported local transmissions. 2 resources from the Singapore Ministry of Health are linked below. The first is an update on the individual reported cases in Singapore for anyone who wants to keep abreast of what's happening there. The second is a more general site which contains information on the virus and its effects and is updated regularly for anybody who wishes to understand and keep abreast of what's happening from a well-informed source. Link to Singapore Ministry of Health press releases concerning each of the individual cases. Link to Singapore Ministry of Health updates and general information about the link. 4 February 2020 Singapore now has 4 locally transmitted infections. All 4 can be traced back to people who traveled to or came from link. In the context of outbreaks like this, you sometimes hear things along the lines of governments are working on a plan how to deal with this virus. Wouldn't there already be plans in place for pandemics that just need to be minimally adjusted to the properties of the exact virus involved? Yes, and it's called WHO. They're always monitoring for new diseases and are ready to create plans for different diseases as they arise. It's just kinda hard to plan how you will deal with an unknown infection before you actually know what you're going to have to deal with. How can you tell the difference between being a bit ill, sick, and having the coronavirus? Are there any obvious signs that separate it from traditional flu? Yes, actually. The majority of cases so far have resulted in a fever followed by a cough followed by shortness of breath, but rarely sniffles or sneezing. If your symptoms are predominantly a stuffed nose and sneezing, which are typically the first symptoms of a cold or flu, then you likely don't have the coronavirus. None of the 99 patients from the original study of hospitalized patients had a runny nose or sneezing as their first symptom. Most of them didn't have it at all. What's the deal with that paper finding HIV genes in the coronavirus? Assuming that the results of that paper are true, does that make it harder to fight? Does it make it easier to spread? Does it make it more lethal? It is definitely not the case. The authors of the paper typed in the amino acid sequence insertions into a search engine that finds other similar sequences. But with short sequences like those they typed in, seriously? 6 amino acids in length? What a joke. You're going to get a lot of results. They cherry-picked HIV out of the list for no scientific reason. Try it yourself. Here's the link. Just type your amino acid sequence of interest in. You'll find a lot of results, and a lot of link is a travesty that paper has been promoted and shared by someone with a very large audience and no virology expertise. Fueling the fire of conspiracy theorists. Also, for what it's worth, it, like anything uploaded to Bjorkive, was not peer-reviewed. Edit. P.S. Thanks for the gold. I'm curious, how did they actually first discover this virus? For example, an infected patient goes to the doctor with symptoms of pneumonia. Won't the patient be normally treated as just another infection? Why would they test the patient for the kind of virus that is causing the infection?